So, sir, can you give us a spoiler-free brief synopsis of the film?
Well, some people have said it's an eco-horror, which is a new one on me, but there we are. But it's essentially about this businessman, Tucker, whose naked ambition is to raise a wood to the ground to build his vanity project home, really. And there's a bunch of travellers living on the land that he evicts violently, and one of them, a feral youth, the eponymous crow of the title, stays there and is set upon a mission to stop him.
So it was based on Tim Reese's stage play, Stone the Crows.
That's it, yeah.
How close do you stick to the stage play, you know?
I think the stage play was two parallel monologues.
Right.
So you had two actors on stage talking, like two monologues. So it doesn't lend itself to immediate kind of transference to the film medium. So it's more like adapting a short story.
So the original stage play then had no supernatural elements?
Not much, no.
Okay.
No, it was much more social documentation, really. You know, it was a tale of two economic forces, if you like, and those we wanted to keep that, of course. But they aren't necessarily horror elements, are they?
No.
And so we've turned it into a horror film, I guess. It doesn't belie the original story. Sorry, it doesn't renege on the original story, I don't think, at all. That's still very much within the piece, but you have this other layer of threat. And I think the violence and the threat was always in the play, because he does commit atrocities, decapitation and so on, you know, in the play. But much more from the point of view of a very damaged, misguided feral youth. But we've put in this psychological element of him hearing the almost religious voices which tell him to do these things, albeit that it's Druidal and American culture rather than, say, Christian, you know. And he turns into almost a kind of savage jihadist, doesn't he? You know, and we wanted to keep that element in there. But I felt by introducing the supernatural element that it somehow added something to the flavour of the piece. It
plays like a metaphor to me, like you mess with nature, and inevitably it's going to fight back.
You're absolutely spot on, Billy. I mean, I really feel that very, very strongly. There's no point making a film in any genre that doesn't have some inherent undercurrent of intelligence. And from my point of view, yeah, if you're some kind of avaricious, insensitive, who doesn't understand nature, then and you abuse nature, then nature ultimately will abuse you back. I have green sensibilities, you know. Yeah. Gosh, you know.
We all should.
We all should, absolutely, you know. But I wouldn't decapitate somebody
no.
on the altar of that belief.
Well, I think at that point the spirituality goes out the window.
Well, of course,
and you go lopping heads.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, in some respects, you know, that's where he becomes a misguided person, like a latter-day jihadist.
Oh, that's what you said, and I can see that because that's the extent of their belief. Though it's kind of like they believe they will, you know, go to nirvana if they follow it through at the risk of dying themselves.
Absolutely.
And that's the ultimate in belief.
It is. And to those, in some respects, the film has two forces of good and evil. Not just good and evil, but two forces of good and two forces of evil. And one would like to think that the forces of good win out in the end, because ultimately that ego clash between Crow and Tucker is about male ego. And it's quite deliberate and definite in the story that Alicia, who goes from trophy wife Dollybird at the beginning, I guess, goes on this journey from somebody who's wearing high heels in a field to somebody who ends up with Wellingtons and the scarification that Crow has, who has a sensitivity for the wood. That is not happen chance.
Terence Stamp. How did he come on board?
Crow, the character played by Tom Rhys-Harris, has an internal misguided monologue going on in his head, and it needed to be godlike. And initially we weren't sure where this should be, you know, voiceover or something, and then to get somebody in for a few days to do that. But in the end, I thought this presence had to be there on screen, and there was something about Terence. We thought about it for ages and ages and ages, and there was something about Terence's look which is absolutely unique. He was an icon. He was voted in the 60s the most beautiful man in the world, and this chiseled look, and he's still prepossessing of this aged beauty.
Enigmatic.
And he's incredibly enigmatic as a man.
The eyes as well.
Absolutely. They tell a million stories. Just the look tells a million stories. And, you know, I don't want to get too film schooly about this, but ultimately, film is about connotation, not denotation. And so if you want to con out, you know, you can get a face to tell a million stories rather than get all the actors to tell it.
Yeah. Well, it's quite a political film, you know, as well. And
well,
with that and the spirituality, which doesn't go too hand in hand with horror very often.
There's nobody that enjoys a kind of a slasher horror film more than I do, right?
And me.
Absolutely. It's great fun, but that isn't this film.
No.
This film is about a clash of belief systems. It's about a clash of economics. It's about a fundamental battle type clash between one person and another, and it's also about equilibrium.
Yeah.
And one would hope that the story reaches a state of equilibrium by the end, by the time that Alicia walks, that final image of her walking into the wood.